Okay, so here we are in lesson 1.2, group-based reversed foot. And I keep throwing that big word around, group-based reversed foot. What does that mean? Well, the reversed foot part of this refers to the way the foot functions, right? So the reversing means that I can have forward kinematics, right? Joint lower down the joint chain will rotate around the one higher up on the joint chain. But I can also have reverse kinematics, where, there we go, correct direction. This joint is higher up in the joint chain, but technically it's rotating around this one, which is lower on the joint chain, right? So we need that in order to get the heel peel, and this would also be, right, reverse kinematics. So that's what the reverse foot portion of this refers to. The group-based portion is simply how we are putting together a reverse-based foot. There are other ways to do this. Sometimes people reverse some joints on here and stuff like that. But we're using, if we look at the hypergraph here, we've got the 3 IK handles that are on the joints, and they are being grouped together into sort of this crazy group sandwich, right? And this is what this section is going to look like when it's finished. And by grouping these two together, we get this new group here, and we get a new pivot point. Every time you make a new group, you get a new pivot point. And by placing these pivot points at different locations on the foot, we've even got one hovering underneath the heel, you have different points of rotation. So that's how we're putting it together. And I should mention that this particular iteration of a reverse foot is based on, in large part, something from a book called The Art of Rigging Volume 1. It's a very good book if you already know how to rig and you're looking for more advanced projects and tools and things. This is different from theirs, especially with how we connect it to the control. It's a different method there and a couple different settings, but overall this basic idea comes originally, at least in my mind, from that book. Alright, so we're going to return now to the version of the rig that we left in the last lesson. And we've got 2 controls, we've got 2 sets of joint chains, each with a set of 3 IKs on them. We've got a whole bunch of IK handles over here, and these IK handles are what we're going to be grouping together. Alright, so I'm going to work in Hypergraph to select some of these. I'm going to select the left foot IK and the left toe IK. There we go. And I'm going to say Control G. And we're going to title this left toe tap group. Enter. Alright, and we need to make sure we specify left and right. Groups are separate, distinct objects, and just like joints and IK handles and things like that, so they do need to have separate names. Alright, and then we're going to move the pivot point to the center of the foot joint. So we hit Insert, hold down V, snaps in place, and I'm going to kind of check and make sure that snapped to the right spot, because sometimes these will not. Okay. Then we're going to take the left ankle IK, and we are actually going to group it to itself. Seems strange, but again, it gives us a pivot point, then we can move to a different location. We're going to call it left heel peel group. Insert, hold down V, and we're actually going to also snap this one to the center of the foot joint. Alright, there we go. So those 2 groups would be the one where this toe rotates around the middle of the foot for the toe tap, and then the second one is where this ankle joint rotates around the middle of the foot for the heel peel. Then what we're going to do is we're going to select, let me zoom in here, we're going to shift select both of these groups and group them together. Alright, so now all 3 IKs are under one group. And we're going to call this left toe pivot. And we're going to move this pivot point to the center of the toe. This is going to be for the standing the foot up on the toe and for the toe twisting around the toe. And now we need a pivot point under the heel. So what do? Well, we select this group, and we just hit Control G to group it to itself. And call that left heel pivot group. And this one's a little tricky because I need it to be not on a joint. I actually need it off the joint. But I'm going to hit Insert, hold down V, and I'm going to first snap it to the heel joint because I want it to be in line with the joints this way, right, from left to right. I don't want to be twisting the heel around some weird spot off to the side. And then I'm going to go in my side view, and I'm going to just pull it down like this, and then over like this. And where you place this depends entirely on your model. Your character will have their heel set up differently. And this is basically, you're planning it where you want the foot to be dug into the ground if you're twisting around the heel. Alright, and then the last group, the last thing that we need to solve for is rotating the whole foot. We can't rotate this joint anymore because of these IKs that are growing further down the foot. I can't just connect to this specific joint and rotate it, and that's all fine. So what we need is actually one more group to be the sort of all-encompassing group. So we're going to call it whole, just kidding, left whole foot group. There we go. And this one, the pivot point's going to go up by the left ankle. There we go. So, and what this will be for is for rotating the whole foot. And actually, because it contains all the IKs, it's also going to be for moving the whole foot, as if you're grabbing that one ankle IK. Undo. Oh. Undid too far. Alright. So now we have all of our groups set up. Your group should look something like this. If you were to add any other bells and whistles, any other groups, which you could make groups that go kind of, to one side of the foot or the other for a foot roll. You put pivot points there. You would need them to be anywhere above this toe pivot, right? Because that contains all 3 IKs, and anywhere below the left foot setup, right? So they can go to either side of this heel pivot as long as they're underneath the whole foot group. Alright, and then the last thing we're going to do before we start connecting things to attributes is we're going to put a constraint on this whole foot group. So we've got to select the control first. You select the driver first, and then we're going to shift select the whole foot group, and we're going to go to constrain, parent, and we can test this, but I should be able to, bend the whole leg, move it back and forth, and rotate the entire foot. There we go. Make sure you zero that out before you go any further, and we can see the parent constraint under here. Now, before we move on to connecting any of these attributes to their various groups, there's one thing I need to mention, and because we're going to be connecting them not to the whole group, but to specific axes of rotation. Now, my model, alright, is facing in the Z direction, specifically facing in Z positive. And what does that mean? Well, if I click on the foot control and I pull it forward, right, the Z numbers are positive. So everything on this side of the Z-axis is a positive number, and everything on this side of the Z-axis is a negative number. And this is important because this is sort of the standard direction to face your model in. So when I'm speaking about specific rotations of these groups, right, if I look at the heel peel group, what direction would I need to rotate it in order for this to pull up? Well, it's in the X direction, right? And that's because this set of rotations, it's world rotations, right? These new groups that we've made, this is not to do with your joint orients, that's different. So if you modeled your character facing in the X direction, if you modeled your character facing 90 degrees away from where mine is, then they're facing this way, which means you would need to be using the Z-axis for some of these. For others, for something like the toe twist, right? That's always going to be y-axis. Heel twist always going to be y-axis, unless for some reason you planked your model and have them facing, up or down. But so in most cases, all these twists will be the y-axis, but you are going to have to, worst case scenario, look at your model. And if the x-axis is the one that's up here, that is the rotation you need, then that's what you connect. So that's going to be up to you to double check your model. I'm going to work off of facing z positive, but make adjustments as you see necessary for how your model is set up. So we need to connect these various attributes to specific axes of rotation on individual groups that we've got set up here. So I'm going to go to Window, General Editors, Connection Editor. And this is a type of window we haven't seen yet, but it's somewhat common in Maya. And basically the idea is that you can load an item into each section, and then it doesn't matter if you have them selected, you can click all the places you need to. So what we need to do is we need to put the control, select it, and say reload left, and that will load it into the left-hand side. And the reason the control is on the left-hand side is because it says right here from to, so any information that we would input in our finalized rig, let's say from the heel peel, would go from here, so let's say I just put the number 10 on it, would go from here to a rotation on one of the groups. That's how this works. Now before we load the next thing, I want you guys to go up to options and make sure that auto connect is turned off. I've found that kind of gets in the way, because as soon as you select two things, it connects them, and then like what if you clicked on the wrong thing? It's annoying to try and get rid of. So we're going to do the heel peel first. So I'm going to go to my hypergraph and select the heel peel group. I'm going to say reload right. And because I have this particular item selected, the heel peel attribute on the control is only one number. It's only one value. And so you can see a lot of stuff is grayed out. Those are things that are not the same type of value or have more than one value, stuff like that. So it kind of grays out things that you can't connect to. For example, rotate. Well, there's 3 different axes of rotation, so it's saying which one is this one number going to. And so I can click on this little plus sign and it'll open up the axes of rotation. And in my case, it's going to be the rotate X. Now I click on it, nothing happens. This is a visual glitch in Maya that will happen sometimes, particularly to me. And I can't see that it's selected, but it is. And when I click the word make, you can see it highlights. It has made that connection now. And if I want to test that, I can click on my control, click on the word heel peel, and scrub through the values, right? And what should be happening is that the heel is moving, and also then the knee, because of course it's got to if the heel is moving. But these should not be. These 2 joints should be planted. They shouldn't be moving anywhere. And going into negative numbers will not do anything good, because it shouldn't be doing that. But at least the positive numbers should be functioning properly. And zero that out. Alright, and so that's the general idea. We select an attribute over here, we put in a new group on this side, and we select which rotate it should connect to. So toe tap. I select the toe tap group. I say reload right. It reloads it into here, and then I click on the little plus symbol so I can get to the rotates. And this is also going to be rotate X. I click make. And you can see it turns yellow, so if you were ever to select a group, you would know which one is connected. Now, if you ever made the wrong connection and thought, oh man, that stinks, that's the wrong one, you can either select both in here and hit break, or go into here, right click, and say break connections. Either way, that will break the connection between the 2 things. Alright, and if we wanted to test this, again, I would click on the controller, go to the toe tap. And this is the kind of thing that you do want to be testing as you go, because you want to make sure that you've got the right axis of rotation. Alright, next up, toe stand. That's going to be using the toe pivot group. So I'm going to select that in hypergraph and say reload right. And we're going to go to rotate. And for the toe stand, this is actually, again, going to be rotate X. We click make. And then toe twist, we're going to stay on this same group, but it's going to be the rotate Y this time. Let me click make. And so I can click on my controller and I can test these two things. There we go. Nice thing about facing in the positive direction for Z is that positive numbers move this object into the right direction for me. Makes my rig a little more intuitive. There we go. And last but not least, heel twist. I'm going to select that on the left-hand side. I'm going to go over my hypergraph, select the heel pivot group, reload that to the right, open up the rotates, select the rotate X, and click make. And this one actually works a little bit better if you can kind of have the heel up a little bit. There we go. Oh. Nope, wrong axis. That's my fault. We're going to hit break. It's the rotate Y, because this is a twist. There we go. This is why we test things. There we go. That's how we want that to work. Alright, now you'll probably have noticed that the two things that were a twist are both rotate Y, and the three other objects, the standing on the toe, the peeling and heel, the toe tap, those were all on the X, or at least they're all in the same axis. So if you do have your model facing in the opposite direction, it's pretty easy to figure out which axis it is. You only have to figure out once, and then it's going to be the same for those other three. If you were to add the foot roll on the other side, then those would be the third axis. So in my case, that would be the Z axis. But we didn't add that to this particular rig. Norman, however, does have that functionality. Alright, so we've got our foot control pretty much finished. Translates, we'll move the whole foot. Rotates, we'll rotate the whole foot. Visibility, we want to be able to turn off and on the control. And then these new attributes that we added to the bottom. So the only thing we're really not going to use is the scale. Scaling the rig we're making, there's no stretchy IK or anything like that. So there will be a global control that we can scale the whole thing on, but I don't need these to be scalable. So actually I'm going to right click on them and I'm going to say hide selected. I'm not going to lock them. I'm just going to hide selected. And it cleans up the control a little bit, right? I can't accidentally, mess that up. The scale isn't connected to anything, but still, I don't want to be messing around with that. And that should be your fully finished group-based reverse